Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them. Choir song in my head. It's an Rising Appalachia. Oh, sunny days, you rest my soul. You make it easy to see the gold. Oh, sunny days, you rest my soul. You make it easy to see the gold. Take me down to a clean river. Bury my burdens and quell this fever. Take me higher and... Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember it, but like, it's so fun. Like, it's so fun to do. I'm so excited about singing it.
Brave Hearts, wasn't that so beautiful? Aren't you so excited? You just got to hear Andrea sing.
Oh my God, I don't know if we're doing that. We just recorded that. I was not putting my stomach into that at all. That is not fair. You tricked me.
I did trick her. Brave Hearts, I just moved the microphone closer to her face while she was singing.
Oh, sing the song. Yes, it is beautiful. Really fun song. There's a few of them. It's amazing how we learn the song, and in the beginning I don't know it, and it's fine. I know it will come over time, and then there's this tipping point that my friend, I would say Madeline, and I are like, oh yeah, now it's there. So that's choir. Hi, friend.
Hello. Happy to see you again.
Yes, twice in 1 week. I don't see you for long periods of time. And we even got to have a joint experience this week.
We did. We've learned a lot. We've had new experiences, new learnings. It's been a really beautiful week.
Mm-hmm. We had our sleepover. I did my mouth tape.
I did pot. all new experiences.
Oh my gosh, I have to tell us. That's so funny. I remember coming to Colorado in the very beginning and saying that, do pot or did pot. And someone just being like, you don't do pot, you smoke it. It's not coke. It's not a hard drug.
Now you eat it.
I know, now you eat it. That wasn't a thing then. Yes, you had your first gummy experience. How was it?
Yeah, I actually feel like I learned a lot. And it was so different than all of my other drug/medicine experiences, which have been this was also held space, because you held space for me, and intentional. But the cannabis was so of the body, and most of the other medicines I've done have been much more psychedelic, of the mind, or transcendent into other spheres. And this one was the mind is definitely not working very well, and instead just pay attention to what's going in the body. So it was really incredible how different that experience was.
Yeah, I'm so glad that, you're still having new experiences.
Yes. And I talked to another friend, and she was at a panel where a whole bunch of different, maybe sex and intimacy coaches were on this panel. And the last question was, what's your favorite drug to have sex on? And apparently it was a universal answer across the entire panel was cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah, because it puts you in your body.
That definitely makes sense. Do you want to know what my favorite drug to have sex on is? Cannabis.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So another thing I learned this week. So now I'm excited to try that.
Yeah. And do you like smoking it?
No.
Yeah, you're anti-smoking it.
I'm also asthmatic.
I did not know this about you. I'm your emergency contact. That's something I should know.
You probably should know. It's very under control now, but it is something I went to a hospital for as a kid, things like that. And so even though I was drawn to smoking and the oral fixation as a child, it felt so terrible in my lungs that it really wasn't possible for me to get addicted to it. I hate to smoke. It hurts my throat. I have a throat issue anyway. But I have learned that if someone else is smoking it, then you come together and you kiss, and then
It's a secondhand version, and so it's softer, and I can still get high that way, and it's a really beautiful way to connect as well.
Interesting. And for those of you who are listening who don't know, we live in Colorado, where medicinal marijuana and then recreational marijuana have been legalized for many, 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 many years. So the options that are available to not smoke cannabis are vast.
Yeah, it's just it's funny. It's not a big deal anymore. Hasn't been for a long time. So, speaking of new experiences, on Monday night, we attended a letting go of attachments ceremony.
It's really beautiful. It was kind of an impromptu gathering of essentially a bunch of strangers. I didn't actually even know the person who had reached out to me if I wanted to do it. We were part of another group. And so Andrea and I just decided to say yes, but we didn't actually know who was going to be there.
We had no idea how many people were going to be there. We didn't know where we were going. It was a house 15 minutes north of Boulder, really in the mountains, like surrounded by trees and wildlife. And it was a beautiful setting.
And obviously the text was compelling enough for us to say yes, because it just described it as this letting go ritual in honor of Sawwen.
It looks spelled like Samhain.
Samhain, Samhain.
But it's a Celtic tradition that's pronounced Sawwen. Sawwen is a Gaelic festival on the 1st of November, marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or quote unquote darker half of the year. It is also the Irish language name for November.
And just in case you're wondering, we are reading this out of Wikipedia because this is how new it is for us. This is we were literally looking at Wikipedia on our way up to the event.
It's really about the halfway between the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. And it is known as a time in a similar way to fall, like the leaves are falling from the trees, things are dying. And it's said to be a time when the veil between life and death becomes much thinner.
I think it says in there too that it's like a pagan and witchy holiday. So Braveheart says something about me is, as I've been going through my life lately, I'm more conscious about this, is that I end up coming across experiences that just feel really resonant. And I'm like, oh, it feels like a knowing or remembering. As Andrea and I are going to talk about the experience that we had on Monday night, and even though this is my very first time researching this holiday and understanding it, there is a part of me that's like, oh, right. This feels like a ritual I should do every year at this time, is how it kind of landed. It landed with weight in my chest.
Okay. And for many years, I celebrated the Day of the Dead tradition by getting out the pictures of my ancestors and framing them and creating an altar and honoring their lives at this time of year. In honor also of that thin veil between life and death. And this felt also a little similar to that, in that I'm honoring the land, I'm honoring the people that came before, and how can I release attachments that don't serve me anymore?
Shall we talk about what the exercise was?
Yeah.
The ritual?
There was a ceremony. There's only 6 women. And the rules are that you choose something out of your house that you want to let go of. So it has to be an object. You have to be able to touch it. So it has to be something you can carry and wrap up. And ideally, it's something that doesn't serve you anymore, or that you need to let go of and release your attachment from.
But in order to get to that, there's a process of getting to that object. They actually recommend that you find 10 objects and you go around your house, picking these up, holding them, having some sort of interaction with each of the objects. And then at the end of that, choosing one. And for me, the process of having to find 10 and then the choosing one was something, but actually finding 10 objects that I was attached to was very much part of this part of this ritual, even though that happened prior to going to their home.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't do that because I didn't have time and I wasn't interested. And I thought about all the different things I could give away. And yeah, had a very hard time coming up with something. As I went through my house, I thought, no, this has so much meaning. This came from my mom, or this came from my daughter, or I've had this for 20 years and it reminds me of XYZ, or I use this every day. And if I give it away, I'm just going to order it again on Amazon tomorrow. It definitely was a difficult process. I was like, oh, what am I going to give away? And ultimately for me, it often came down to pieces of art or pieces of jewelry that either I no longer wore, no longer inspired me, no longer brought me joy, or potentially brought me heartache. And I needed to release from my life.
Yeah. And so for me, like, even though the point of it was to come up with one object, what I found was I too ended up like, oh, here's art and here's jewelry. But then I also had a box of mementos that I had not looked in a long time. And a side effect of me going through and like looking at all these things was realizing like one of my objects was my mom's jewelry box, which is like one of the only things I took from her from my dad's home after my mom passed away, because I loved going through jewelry as a kid and all of her jewelry, trying it on, losing it, trying more on, losing it. And I found out like a whole box or a bag of earrings that were my mom's or my aunt's that were not sent. They were just theirs. They weren't special. It wasn't like these were like wedding rings or like diamond earrings or anything like that. They were just a whole bunch of little earrings and bracelets that I was like, oh, like, why am I holding on to these? Like, these are not my style. I'm not going to wear them. And I was like, oh, I should actually give these all to my 13-year-old niece. And in this way, this like letting go ritual helps me come up to like, oh, like there's actually something here that I just, if I hadn't done this, right, that box of mementos would have been in my closet till another 5 years. I mean, who knows when I would have opened it again. And so in this like envisioning this as an annual thing of recognizing there is something I can let go of probably every year that I just don't even think about. And so I'm really excited for Christmas. I'm just going to give her this little bag of earrings.
Yeah, and I really love the idea of doing this every year, finding something to give away. But I had a little misconception about it. I thought originally that we would be throwing this object into the fire or getting rid of it or releasing it to the gods. I pictured a release of this object and never seeing it again and it going away. But that's not what the ritual was about. The actual ritual was wrapping all the pieces up, setting them on the table, forming a circle, having some sharing, a landing meditation, and then each of us going and choosing an item from the table. We didn't know what it was because it was wrapped up, and then bringing it back. We unwrap it. Whoever's item that is, they tell their story about why they're letting it go. And then I get to keep that item. And so that was such a surprise. I love the idea of that item's energy no longer serving the person giving it away, but being able to serve someone else and live on. And it speaks to the long life of objects in a sense, because some objects live a lot longer than we do. I remember reading The Girl with the Pearl Earring. And, it's all about this painting, right? And this painting goes from house to dumpster to another house. And then it ends up in an art store. And I think about things as I throw them away and think, oh, this is going to go to ARC. And then someone else is going to put it up in their house. And then they're going to throw it away. And then someone else is going to grab it. Things do have a long life and they can offer love or warmth or beauty to a long train of people.
I think that was definitely a really beautiful part of this. There was another element of magic that I really felt in this ritual, which is that, so one person felt called to pick an object first and they went to the table. And then after, as Andrea just said, the person whose object it was shared why they were giving it away. And then that's the next person who picked an object off the table. And there was only 6 of us, but it was, I'm not even going to say bizarre. It was just so beautiful how appropriate each gift was for the person who ended up receiving it. The candle holder that I received, a gold candle holder with stars, which really couldn't be better branded for the goddess temple. And my colors, and like it fits perfectly on my altar. And it was given to me by a woman, and her whole story about it as being given to her by a group of women who were priestesses, who were trying to land.
They were building a business in Aspen, but things fell away, didn't work.
Yeah. And so it was like, I absolutely take the energy of what's in this candle holder from that group of women and now bring it into my home as an activation and a connection point of another group of women. And yeah, so that was just my example. And just really feeling in each object this like, oh, in someone else's letting go, that there was this like, oh, and the letting go allows a new activation and energy to form for someone else with the same object.
Yeah, I really just felt it then when you said it. So the letting go gives us space for something new to come in. And many, many, many things can come in. For you, it's like you let go of one thing and another thing came in that was more serving and more appropriate to your life right now.
Right? Like think about the object that I gave away to that candle holder. It's like, oh, right.
Completely different associations. Completely different.
Different associations, different aesthetics, different everything. And one was in a box, hidden away in a closet, never to be seen again. And the other one now it has a prime location on my altar, right? I mean, that also just seeing, oh, I'm thinking about that for myself right now. Like something that is just tucked away, has no life force energy in exchange. And I remember like the woman who got my thing, this little like, what's it called? Panorama. I forget what these things are called.
Diorama. We used to do them like in 6th grade.
She put what I had given and let go of onto a prominent space on her bookshelf in her living room. And then same thing for me. So yeah, I'm just gonna take a deep breath and really allow myself to feel the magic of being introduced to this ritual and the potency of it. And this recognition that it really served me, and I'm looking forward to making it as an annual thing.
Me too. And the item that I chose, of course, I didn't know what it was, but it was very on brand for me. It was a red cowgirl hat that someone else was releasing because of its symbolism to them. And I am in a brand pivot. I'm in a business pivot. I'm starting to show up in my life in different ways and more creative ways. Red is my color. Hats are part of my brand. I wear them like 85% of the time. It was just really kind of
startling.
Yeah, it was startling. Yeah. Yeah, and then hearing just the different energy that had been associated with that hat and how that just fits seamlessly into what I'm doing with the hat and all the expression that's part of that, of me wearing it, was really potent.
Yeah. And then also just recognizing here we were in a group of, strangers, but also immediately dropping in vulnerability and sisterhood and realizing all the connections, the weaving, all right? Like this is, 20 miles away, different generations, different ages, and all these beautiful little intricate connection points that had us leave feeling so nourished and so fulfilled on our drive home.
Completely. It was a beautiful night. We also learned a little bit about death. We had some discussions on death, and one woman spoke about a death folder that she's really has become intent on working on. She's not anticipating dying. She's not sick. This is just a practice of putting together a folder for the people left behind if something should happen to you.
And it certainly includes the things like a will and
the logistical stuff, as well as though what she spoke to was writing letters to people that she didn't necessarily want to give them yet, but would have preferred they read after she's gone.
Yeah, I think there was 2 prompts. Is there someone that you need to forgive and you could write a letter to them? And is there someone who you want them to forgive you? and write a letter to them. And again, you may or may not be ready to send it. After writing it, you might want to send it. But it was this idea that, okay, but if you were to die, at least there was some closure there.
Yeah. And my first thought to that was, gosh, don't you want to tell them now? Not after you're gone. I thought, gosh, who am I not telling? Who am I not expressing my love to? Or who am I not telling everything I need to say? Is there someone? Does that come up for you? Is there someone? Can you think of the people that you would, not necessarily that you have to share them, but can you think of the people you'd write the letters to?
Yep, I can.
Okay.
I will say something that I have done, which was an exercise that I learned about this from, I don't know, a couple of different workshops that I was in. But it's the idea of writing your own eulogy. And you give yourself 5 or 10 minutes. You write down essentially what you think or what you want, not you think, like what you would want someone to be saying about you on your death. And you're envisioning yourself at 80, right? Like old. And there's different things that can come up in this exercise. One is that you can look at the eulogy, and when you read it, you're like, oh, am I actually living? Is this the life I'm living? And if it's not, then that gives you a point of context. And then if it is, it's like, oh, well, where would I go deeper into? Or I did this exercise a couple of years ago, and I actually did it with my dad and my brother. I remember my sister-in-law coming home, and she's like, oh, what'd you guys do this morning? And so I was like, I had us all write our eulogies. She just looked at me and she's like, oh, I figured you were going to say you like mucked the horse's stalls, right? Which would have been the standard thing, or like watch the baseball game. And I was like, nope, this is what I'm doing. I'm in my personal growth journey. I'm bringing it to my family. So let's see, my dad at the time was probably 91. So that would have put me 47. My brother would have been 46. And my brother at the time was kind of like trying to figure out like a career path. So he was in the middle of like change and some turmoil around that. My dad at 91 in his, later years. And then there was me. And I cannot stress enough how beautiful the experience was. In my case, after I read my eulogy, my dad and my brother specifically was like, you didn't mention any of the things I would have thought you were going to mention. He's like, first of all, you're like way more spiritual than I realized. My brother and I are close. I hadn't shared with him fully on my journey of what I had been on. And he's like, you didn't even mention your traveling. He's like, you didn't mention your sport. He did and I was like, oh yeah, like these things that were so defining of me for so long were not the things that I wanted to be remembered for. And so in that way, both my dad and brother got to see me for how I see myself and how I want to be seen, which is really incredible. And then the bigger gift was having my dad write his own eulogy, because it was so deep. It was so potent. And of course I kept it. My brother's like, tuck that one away, because now we have a eulogy to read from him at his service, whenever that is. He also wrote in there, like the one area of regret, which in my case, has to do with the fact that my brother and I are not practicing Catholics. And as my dad is a devout Catholic, former priest, there was something tied to him not being a good Catholic because my brother and I were not practicing, that he associated those two things. And for any of you who know my dad, I would love to say is like the gold star standard of like a Catholic who is really leading from love and compassion and from empathy. So hearing him say that he has a doubt about his own faith of like how he would be perceived by God had like a little bit of a heartbreak for me in that moment. But then also it gave my brother and I the opportunity to say, well, okay, so Dad, we understand that you define being a good Catholic as someone who is loving, who values family, and who values community. And he was like, yeah. And we're like, well, do you believe that my brother and I are loving, dedicated to family, and like caring about community? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, okay. So like we feel like even though we are not in this label of Catholic by going to church every Saturday or Sunday, we are living the values which you hold dear. And could you potentially see that the things that you find important about being a good Catholic, we are expressing, just not through the label of Catholicism?
Boom, mic drop. Letting go of form.
Letting go of form. Letting go of form.
Once again. Comes up all the time now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, I can't say how my dad received that, right? Like I felt like he cognitively understood, and maybe it did bring him some peace in his heart. And I also know that in other conversations since then, I've had to kind of remind him of that conversation again. But nonetheless, it felt, I can never project onto what someone else is going to feel, but it did give my brother and I the opportunity before my dad died to express to him how we felt like he had impacted us in the way he wanted to.
What I also hear is just you addressing death with your family, with your brother, with your dad, talking about death openly, and in a sense, facing it, even though none of you are facing it.
But we're facing it in the sense my dad's like turning 93. So like it's coming. It's not like.
Yeah, I know. But you're not sick. Like you're not like.
Yeah. And he's not sick. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, yeah, it's probably not that far off for him. But I just think doing that in general is huge. You know, death is something in our society that is really easy. Like I don't pass any cemeteries in my daily life. Never see it. You know, we put our people in nursing homes. That's kind of the way it works. And for practical reasons, obviously, as well. But death is not something that's around. You know, it's getting to be more around, of course, as we get older, because we know more people that get sick and pass away. But it's easy to just avoid for a lot of our life, like avoid looking at. And it has been easy for me because I have not lost anyone close to me. And thinking about it is just a big thing in itself.
Yeah, I've had several teachers who've helped me see that actually like one of the fundamental tenets of our culture is to try to deny death, which is the thing that is guaranteed. And so in our obsession with youth and our obsession of looking young and of never aging, like we are denying on this mass scale, so much of what we do on a daily basis is to try to avoid considering death. And in doing so, for me, what I have been able to recognize in embracing death is like, you know, these death and rebirth cycles, is that there is so much wisdom in aging. And aging means getting closer to death. And there's just a lot of beauty there that I now am able to see and face, but it requires really sitting with discomfort. And in my case, my mom died when I was 34. So we were all at home. She was at home. We were surrounding her. I actually bathed her body when she passed. So I have had a very intimate interaction with death in a really incredibly beautiful way that I'm sure has also shaped my experience.
Yeah. Nobody gets out alive. Nobody. It's really, really important. I'm pretty sure I wrote my eulogy in high school. So I think it must be a common English class assignment. But of course, when you're 16, like there's a eulogy there, right? But that's a very long time ago now. So it seems like not a bad idea to write one every decade and see how it evolves over time.
Yeah.
Like that would be beautiful to see the difference in how you want to be remembered or what you're trying to live in your life. And I can see this landing for some people as a little alarming. Like writing the eulogy, right. I mean. Like coming to my parent, like I'd love to go to them and say, okay, we should probably write a eulogy all together. I think they would just think like, are you thinking we're going to die soon? Why are you thinking about death? Like what? And I'm not sure, but maybe it's because their mortality is closer. I think it's a great exercise and a great practice, and I want to do it. And yeah, part of me feels a little bit uncomfortable, like everyone might not respond to it that well.
Well, 100%. And I think it is designed to shake something up. So my dad happens to be someone who's not afraid of death. His faith is very great and like feels very comfortable with his mortality in that way. So as he was writing it, he knew what he was writing. He couldn't change what he was writing. Like in the sense of if he saw something that he wrote, other than that piece that I just spoke to about like his perception of my brother and my faith, he had no capabilities to change it, right? Whereas like my brother and him writing his eulogy, how he want, like he's like, mid 40s, he's got decades to be like, okay, I'm going to make changes to my own behavior or values to align with what I want my eulogy to be. But it can be very confronting, right? If you write a eulogy, regardless of what age you are, and you're like, I do not like what I see. I do not like what someone's going to remember me as.
It's the ultimate mirror.
Yeah. And I remember my partner reading his to me, and there were some parts that were really sad. And I was like, oh, right. Like, so he had an opportunity to change. Like, he's like, oh, I don't like this part, so I want to change this part. And, in his 50s has the chance to do that. But in someone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, especially not someone who's at all attuned to personal growth, this could be extremely confronting. So I do think that any expectation of how someone's going to respond to either being open to doing it and then to actually doing it, it would be naive.
It should be handled delicately.
Upon further reflection on what we're talking about today, right? We're talking about letting go of attachments. We're talking about death. We're talking about eulogies. Part of the exercise for me of the letting go of attachments and walking through my house was I got divorced in the past year. And when I moved, I really didn't bring a lot of stuff. And I also let go of a lot of stuff. So in that way, I realized that I had already done a pretty deep dive this year, and that part of my journey this year has really been about being at home in myself, like that I am home wherever I am. So in this way, in this combination of going through my home, of looking at these things, I was like, oh, I actually feel like I have very little that I'm attached to right now. Now, keep in mind, brave hearts, so I'm not married. I've got a stepson who is 29, but I didn't live with him. I don't have a lot of family memorabilia all around. My mom's already passed away. My dad's not a collector of anything. He's not object oriented. So there's reasons also why I don't have a lot of stuff. That being said, there's a quality which I recognize, which I am embodying right now. I had some people come over the other day, these two women who we never met. They didn't know who I was. I gave them the tour of the goddess temple. We did a workshop together. And at the end, the woman was like, I'd love to see in the house. She's like, I feel like you could just like grab your bag, walk out the door, and like never look back. Like that. She's like, there's like this, I don't know if she would say detachment, but like there's just like so little here that feels like lived in to some degree. And she's like, is there a place in the house where that feeling exists? And I said, yes. I said, let's go down. It's down in the living room where my altar is, underneath the fireplace. But that reflection made me realize that, yeah, I'm well suited for the life that I'm living right now, which is having a community space as my home where people can come in and out. And that my attachment to objects is really reduced so that I can feel so that I'm as present as possible wherever I am. So this experience that I've had lately is like when I'm in Boston or New York for work, I don't miss home. I don't miss the goddess temple because it's not that I feel at home there, but I guess I do. Like, I just feel, I'm like, oh, like the attachment isn't here. But then when I am here, I'm so glad to be here. It feels for me, it's been a journey into deeper presence has been a result of the letting go of attachments.
I think for me, moving to Costa Rica for a year, I've been back for a year and a half now. So when we took that trip, we took a lot less with us. And so I was there and I didn't have a lot of my stuff, right? I just basically was walking around with my clothing and my bag, which had my computer in it and my phone, and that's it. I put some stuff on the wall, and that completed the decoration. That was the most recent realization of how I didn't actually need the things I thought I needed at home. And when I got back, and now I'm back, I don't sit in my office, which is all decorated. I don't sit in there because the light's not that great, and I want to sit in the living room for my Zoom calls, and I want to sit outside. And so I've realized my just lack of attachment to so many of the things in that room. And I to be honest, I don't really know what to do with them. Like, they make me happy when I look at them. There's lots of things on the wall. I have, an old typewriter and a vase and art and different pieces, but I am kind of in the midst of figuring out my attachment or detachment to those things. And so it's definitely been a journey. And I will say I don't need, and I love the idea of not needing a lot. Like, even when I come for the sleepover, it's like, what do I really need to bring? Right? Like, how many things do I need to like sleep somewhere and get up in the morning? It's just like something I'm kind of tallying in my head. Like, I really like my robe. I need to have my robe. I have these different, things that make me feel at home. And at the same time, I love my house and I feel very comfortable there. And I really do like the way that it holds me. So I think over time for me, the attachments have just grown fewer and fewer. I used to just buy a lot of clothes, buy a lot of stuff. And now, I think we recently talked about this, the idea of like, when you get something you really love, you're like, oh my God, I love that piece. I want to look at it every day. It's so great. And there are other things in my house then, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm not very attached to that. I don't love it that much. If it's not a fuck yes, then it shouldn't stay in the house. And I remember when Marie Kondo's book came out and going through and saying, holding up an object and saying, does it bring me joy or not? That allowing for a purge. So I think this idea of releasing an attachment every year is so beautiful. And I'm really excited to have it on the schedule and just know that I'm doing it every year. I do a lot of purging anyway. And so things come in and out of my house on a regular basis. But I think being that intentional about something that's no longer serving me could really help me move on when I need to move on. So that's exciting.
And what I'm hearing is that you've already purged a lot of things that maybe didn't have meaning. The struggle is the things that do have meaning, but do you really need them? Are they still in service? That reminded me of a statistic that I heard about Americans and our need for storage and our need for objects. And I'm not able to find it, but just some of the statistics about how much we store. And keeping in mind that when we store stuff, and this is very much true for me, I'm like, oh, I want to keep this. I don't want to let it go. And then I never look at it again until I do a mass purge like 5 years later. So some of the statistics right here is that 11.1% of households currently rent a self-storage facility. I mean, 10% of the facilities. And at 6.1 there's 6.1 square feet per person of self-storage space in the US market. I mean, that's just a huge amount of space per person, which is like, comes out to 2.04 billion square feet of storage space. The statistic I remember was if you put the storage units side by side, I think they went around the earth like 13 times. I mean, it was something absolutely mind-bogglingly insane. Yeah. So if the idea of like letting go of things is like, oh my gosh, like there's a thing that's precious, then I invite you to actually start with the things that aren't precious and just start with the things that no longer have meaning, but are just like.
That's a great idea. And so I've posted several times on LinkedIn having to do with my branding business about how you have to give shit away. And what I mean there is like that you have to give away free advice and give away value so that people understand what you're made of and what you can offer. And I got that, one of these stories from the Anthony Kiedis biopic, the lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. And he's talking about, he was visiting his friend Nina Hagen, 2 points if you know who she is, and going through her closet and looking and finding this really amazing coat that, was embroidered and had fringe and feathers and was just this beautiful piece of art and saying how wonderful it was. And she says, you can have it. And he's like, what do you mean I can have it? Like, I can't take this. This is the nicest thing you have. And she's like, you have to give some stuff away. It has to keep gaining energy. It needs to be in the flow. Money, things need to keep flowing. And this was really shocking to him because he was like, didn't grow up with much. And so anything he had, he was like holding on to. But that really touched me. And of course, hence the song, Give It Away, Give It Away, Give It Away now, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. And so I am trying to think about like, how can I release things and give them away when they're no longer serving me at any time? You know, really just saying like, nope, this isn't mine anymore. I need to move on. I need to keep evolving. This should go to someone else.
Right. And if that feels hard, remembering from the beginning of the podcast, which is that when I let something go that was in a box inside a closet that I was not looking at or seeing, that space opened up for a candle holder that came in that is now front and center on the one place in my home that feels like a home.
Yes. Yeah. It's really beautiful. And there is almost like a lightning when you do get rid of stuff. Like I feel that when I let it go. And I will give a nod to my daughter, who is very good at this. I will collect sentimental objects from the basement, bring them to her and say, okay, so like what things do you want to keep and what things do you want to give away? And she like looks at it for 2 minutes and she's like, I don't want any of it. And I was like, what about this? Don't you want to keep this? This was so amazing. I love this piece. And so I'm like begging her to keep shit. And she's like, no, I'm good. I'm done. And I'm like, okay. There's like this little sadness in me. And I'm so glad she keeps what she wants and she doesn't get attached to things. And it's better. It really is.
So we're going to end with a poem that was read to us by Kylie on Monday night, one of the women at the circle. And it's called Being Human by Naima Penniman. I wonder if the sun debates some mornings not wanting to get out of bed. If the sky grows tired of being everywhere at once. If the clouds desperately try to hold themselves together. If rain is scared of falling and has trouble letting go. If snowflakes get tired of being perfect and one of a kind. If stars wish upon themselves before they die. If they need to teach their young how to shine. I wonder if shadows longed just for once to feel the sun. I wonder if sunrise and sunset respect each other, even though they've never met. I wonder if breath ever thinks of taking a break, if the wind just wants to sit still sometimes. I wonder if streams meet the wrong sea and their whole lives run off track. I wonder if the snow wants to be black, if the soil thinks she's too dark, if rocks are self-conscious of their weight, if sand feels insignificant, if mountains are insecure of their strength. I wonder if waves get discouraged, crawling up the sand, only to be pulled back again to where they began. If the leaves understand they're replaceable and still dance when the wind blows. I wonder where the moon goes when she is in hiding. I want to find her there and watch the ocean spin from a distance. Listen to her stir in her sleep. Effort give way to existence.
It's beautiful. A little tear-inducing for me. Okay.
Be well, brave hearts.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you make a nice transition into the new season.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.